Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Susan Collins. I'm the Dean of the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy, and thank you. And on behalf of the Ford School and the entire University of Michigan, it is such an honor to welcome all of you here today. I'd in particular like to recognize President Mark Schlissel, Provost Martha Pollack, Regent Michael Beam, Regent Emerita Julia Darlow, and several of the university's executive offices and deans who are here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to acknowledge as well my faculty colleagues who are part of the steering committee for today's events. The university's Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and the Chief Diversity Officer, Rob Sellers, Professors Martha Jones, Ann Lynn, and Matthew Countryman, and also my fellow Dean of the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, Aaron Dworkin. Thank you all so much. Indeed, it really is a great honor to welcome all of you here today to hear from one of the nation's most distinguished champions of civil rights, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Before President Schlissel introduces him more fully, I'd like to offer my thanks to Reverend Jackson for spending the entire day here with us, with our students and our faculty. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate all of your time. We're also so pleased to have his wife, Jacqueline Jackson, his son, his daughter, and his grandson all here with us this afternoon. Reverend Jackson, I look forward to your remarks, and I know that I speak for many in this room and many who are watching the live stream that the remarks that you will give us today are so needed and are extremely important, and so we are very much looking forward to them. And now it is my honor to introduce Dr. Mark Schlissel, the 14th President of the University of Michigan. President Schlissel most recently served as provost of Brown University. He's the first physician to lead our university. His academic research has contributed to a detailed understanding of the genetic factors involved in producing antibodies and how mistakes in that process can lead to leukemia and lymphoma. President Schlissel earned his AB in biochemical sciences from Princeton and went on to Johns Hopkins University in medicine, earning both an MD and a PhD. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the University of Michigan's 14th President, Mark Schlissel.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much, Dean Collins, for that very kind introduction and for your outstanding leadership over the past decade of the Ford School of Public Policy. I'd like to thank the symposium organizing committee as well, and also acknowledge the role of my friend Bankole Thompson in helping us organize today's session. Everyone at the Ford School as well who's helped our community in their efforts over the past week or the whole election season understand the impact of this year's election. Today, we recognize a distinguished national leader, and we honor a legacy that spans more than half a century. The Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. has led the way in the struggle for freedom, voting rights, equality, and peace here in the cities and towns of the United States and abroad. We should all take note that his first experience as a social activist was as a student. In the summer of 1960, in his hometown of Greenville, South Carolina, Reverend Jackson refused to be turned away from the segregated local public library. He's been at the forefront of the struggle for civil rights ever since. During the mid-1960s, he worked with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and helped secure the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. He ran for president in 1984 and 1988, building unprecedented coalitions of voters and inspiring millions. And as recently as last week, Reverend Jackson was traveling throughout our nation, working to get out the vote, meeting people in our communities, and battling new challenges to the Voting Rights Act that he had helped to enact. For his numerous accomplishments, Reverend Jackson was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2000. It's our nation's highest civilian honor. The University of Michigan community is also very proud to count Reverend Jackson as an alumnus. He was awarded an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters from our university in 1979. But like many of our graduates, he didn't receive his degree and leave Ann Arbor forever. Reverend Jackson came back to campus. He came back in 1987 to meet with activists in the BAM 3 movement and the University Coalition Against Racism. He also came back to campus in 2000 and spoke in our law quad in support of students who had organized to defend affirmative action. These were momentous times in our university's history, events whose impact reverberates to this very day. They were part of our nearly 200-year history, and they informed the strategic plan we rolled out last month to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of Michigan. And now, he's back today. We all know there's much more work to do. During the run-up to the election and the days since, we've seen attacks that single out individuals and groups based on their identities. We can't forget how this makes our students feel. But we've also seen demonstrations espousing peace, inclusion, and tolerance. We've heard from many in our community about the need to make room for voices all across the ideological spectrum and for all to speak out against hate and discrimination. This afternoon, in fact, students again gathered on our diag to make their voices heard. Before I invite our guest of honor to the stage, I want to share a few words from his University of Michigan commencement address in 1979. He said, "We no longer have the luxury, nor can we afford, racial polarization on various aberrations and expressions of petty apartheid. A multiracial education must be our personal, local, and national goal, for we must develop the capacity to live with each other and not apart from each other." The title of Reverend Jackson's address today is, "What's Next for Us? Hope and Reflection." Please help me welcome civil rights leader, former student activist, founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, and inspiration to all who strive for peace and social justice, the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Today I want to thank President Mark Schisel and Dean Susan M. Collins of the Gerald Ford Public Policy Center, the faculty and students and beneficiaries of the University of Michigan around the world. It's good to be the university that has made its commitment to the America that is and accepted the call, the mission, and responsibility to aid in building the nation that we must become. We are a nation that has come from the pit of 246 years of slavery, which began 157 years before the birth of the nation in 1776, the genocide of Native Americans, from legal segregation of Jim Crow in 1880 to 1954, over 5,000 lynchings without one indictment. The foundation of our nation is this immoral sin for which we have not sought forgiveness nor redemption. Any idea of making America great again reopens the wounds in America's immoral foundation. born in sin and shaped in iniquity. The school has consistently sought to step in the breach and to bring healing to the body politic. We need not for a moment underestimate the damage done to our country and the cleavage in the soul of America in the last few days. It's our nation and our soul that must be healed. What are we confronted with? There is a tug of war for the soul of America. Dr. King and SCLC's mission was to redeem the soul of America. And at the base of our nation is an identity crisis. Do we want to be an aristocracy or a democracy? Multiculturalism or race supremacy? An aristocracy of the few or a democracy for the many? Will we be a one-person, one-vote democracy or ruled by electoral overseers? President Abraham Lincoln said our nation could not survive half slave and half free. A house divided against itself cannot stand. There's been a lot of analysis as to why Secretary Hillary Clinton lost her presidency a few days ago. Much of it valid, but from my perspective, the pundits have missed the central reason. New undemocratic voter laws and voter suppression. R. Berman, in his brilliant book, Give Us the Ballot, points out that between 2011 and 2015, 395 new laws of voter restriction introduced in state legislatures in 49 states. Many of them became law, voter restriction. If the voting rights had been fully and fairly protected, we would be bringing a different discussion today. She won the popular vote. If it were not for voter suppression, she would have won the vote in the Electoral College as well. New voting laws since June 25, 2013 have wiped out 868 polling places. That includes removing polling places from campuses and other familiar places. There's nothing more fundamental in this whole discussion than voter denial access. A nation speaks of meritocracy, but hard work, effort, and excellence cannot match or compete with inheritance, access, and racial favor. Our struggles have made us freer across the years, but not equal. We need to make some moral and legal choices. Shall we be a nation with people who do the crime, including those running multinational corporations and work on Wall Street, do the time? Will we become the double standard of only punishing people of color and the poor? Do we have the nerve to free and pardon those who did their time for the crime and offer them a clean slate and a new start? President Lincoln pardoned Jefferson Davis and other Confederates who engaged in treason against the United States of America in an effort to bind up and heal the wounds after the Civil War. President Ford did the same thing with respect to Richard Nixon after Watergate. Even though he had violated, dishonored, and debased the Constitution, while it was clear that he would have been impeached and convicted and driven from office legally and technically, he was never indicted, tried, nor convicted of anything. Unique to Ford and Nixon was that Nixon was never officially accused, tried, or even sought a pardon. President Ford was simply determined to stop the potential harm, restrain the hemorrhaging, and heal the wound. There are those in their anger and spirit